all the stuff that I had been chasing this whole time meant nothing.
In different cultures, elders are looked up to. I didn't know over here elders weren't looked up to.
Total opposite. And I almost snapped on this gentleman. I mean, it takes a lot for me to snap. Now, there are some things that men should do, and there are things that women should do. Hey fam, how you doing? This is Mark from XR Vision Media. I want to thank you once again for checking in with us. Today we have an amazing topic, as always. But once again, we want to thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing. So today, I'm here with my man, Tomas.
How's it going, guys? Thank you again for joining us on the podcast. We love your feedback. Now that we know what you guys are really liking to hear, we are going to dive into those subjects, okay? So the first one, today's topic to open, what is toxic masculinity?
Yikes. But my thing is, what has created toxic masculinity? I mean, we're talking generation after generation of just how men live. And unfortunately, it's definitely been a bad thing, but for generations, it hadn't been seen as bad. Now, all of a sudden, it's. But my question is, if there's toxic masculinity, is there toxic femininity? Because it's a two-way street. It's not one way. I mean, we're only hearing what women say, and I'm not saying that it's bad. It's just there are some women out there that aren't very nice either. And based on how they were raised and how the women in their lives, I know I'm going to hit some buttons with that one, and I'm good because that's the kind of comments we need so we can keep this thing going and to have the conversation, because conversations about everything are important. And I think the fact that we haven't talked about these things, and now that they're surfacing, they should have been surfacing years ago, but now we're in a position where now we can have the conversation.
There's a lot of toxic masculinity talk going on right now. And we can say, okay, let's look at why you guys are saying that, or what's even toxic femininity, right? But before we even start, I think the root of the problem is that men don't know how to be men no more, right? So if you want the best for the world to be, kind of running the way it used to, in my opinion, more than pointing fingers to either side, I think right now is the perfect time for men and women to unite, because we're so divided. And I understand that there's a difference between the genders on what women typically do, what men typically do. And that's kind of getting, the borderline is getting blurred, right? So I understand. But you got to also understand there's certain workplaces where I work in, there's kegs and stuff where it's 50, 60 pounds. And because it's a female bartender, you got to lift it. You don't want to lift that.
Right.
You don't want to lift it. You have to go home, and then you have to still do your thing at the house, right? So you don't want to burn out at work. And it's not really fair for us to be like, hey, since it's gender neutral, you could do the same thing that we do. It's not really fair. Right? So what's really fair? That's why I say we have to unite.
You brought a point up that was pretty powerful as far as even we're talking about keg wise, right? And we're talking about something that, not saying that the woman can't do it, but it would be easier to be done by a man. And so the thing about it that's really scary is because you say it's a black and white line, and now the gray area has gotten so much bigger, and so you don't even know what black and white looks like because there's so much gray in between. So the line, like you said, the lines are blurred, and the point is there are some things that men should do, and there are things that women should do, and not saying that women can't do them, but they shouldn't do them. I mean, no disrespect to any women that are on the front line in the service, but it wasn't created for women to be on the front line. And and I'm not knocking women, like I said, that are actually doing it. I thank you for your service, but I think you shouldn't have to be in that position. you know, and the way God created it is, you know, men were protectors, and now we've blurred that line that, you know, protection, what is protection? And because the roles have been so messed up now, you're saying that men, you know, are not the men that way they were, and we're talking about generations. And I'm not saying that, you know, I always say bravado and machismo have killed many a men. Well, those two words are only a front. They're not truly who you are, because when bravado and machismo doesn't exist, you still exist. Doesn't take you out of being a man. And those are the things that we've been, you know, portrayed upon our people for a long time, and, you know, in general. And then the thing about it, though, is really hard, is because now you've got so many women. God loved the mothers. God loved the mothers that they've raised these boys. But the problem is, you can't raise men, because there are things that men do that women don't know. And then when women nurture your boys, because that's what you do, there's a point in their life that they need to become men. Just like men can raise girls, they can't raise women, because there are things in life that we can't give them that they need. And so now society is so distraught and pulled away that they've got ideas from so many different sources that don't necessarily dictate who they are as an individual. And so now think, like you said, the lines are so blurred is that they don't even know where to go get the information and what's good, because if they see it and it's liked and followed by so many people, it could still be wrong. But they think that that's the way it's supposed to be. And the unfortunate part is now you've got, you know, these relationships, and we've just discussed that before, and, you know, in regards to what relationships are and what's important. But I think as far as we need to truly get to the point of what true masculinity is and what true femininity is, and then how those two coexist, because they were created to coexist. And the problem is if it's shattered or been, you know, blurred to the point where you don't even understand what it truly means, then you get into a relationship based on false information, and they're doing the same thing, bringing false information into this relationship. And now it's, the gray has become almost white because it's been watered down so much.
You know, you agreeing to what I was saying. Unity is the most important thing, because this world right now where we are hitting at, this world is trying to divide us, you know, and like the saying, divide and conquer. That's what they're doing right now. If the world gets one-sided, it's easier, right? Because there's no side to fall back on, or there's no balance, because it needs two pillars. Just like you walking, you got two legs.
Right.
You know, you can't just run with one leg. And there's a man and there's a woman. That's why we can walk, we can run. I'm not trying to make it too broad, because I want to really focus on the topic. Even though our friend said on his show, what are gender roles? What are, you know, X, Y, and Z?
Right.
And, you know, the clinician was saying that she doesn't believe in gender roles, only teamwork. Now, it makes sense.
Okay.
But there's certain things that men should do, women should do, right? For example, do you see a female agent in the Navy SEAL Team 6?
I don't see it, but I'm not saying that she doesn't exist. But as far as what they do, I don't think a woman's even just physical being could handle on numerous, you know, missions. Not saying that she couldn't do it, but I don't think for the long haul and to be in the right frame of mind. And once again, I mean, here's an area that we might have some issues with, and I bring them on because that just makes the conversation even better. But I think because of the psychological and the way women, the way they view things. I mean, we had a conversation before, and my thing with is men are waffles, women are spaghetti. Okay, and when I say that, I mean men are very compartmentalized. If you look at a waffle, there's nodules separated, right? Women are spaghetti. Everything is intertwined. When you put spaghetti together, you throw it on the plate, it's just on the plate. And so women think like that, everything at once, all at once. We don't think like that because we are not wired that way. And so, no disrespect, if let's say the woman, the Navy SEAL woman is out in an operation, and she decides that because of whatever's going on in her life, now it's part of this mission. It's not specifically part of the mission, but because it's where she is and how she's internalizing things, it now becomes part of the mission. And the problem with men, because we don't think like that, we'll give her a hard time, or why do you think now we have to realize that that's who she is. And vice versa with women, it's like they come at us and certain things. Why didn't you think like this? It's like, well, because to be truthfully honest, I don't think like that.
And the difference in that is because women are emotional creatures.
Yeah.
Men are logical creatures. Now, I'm not saying that either is wrong or right. I'm just pointing out the difference. Your analogy of men are waffles and women are like spaghetti, very beautiful. I was talking to this young lady, and I was describing what you were trying to say. And she was saying, how is it that my past is affecting me right now? I'm like, okay, think about it like this. The same amount of water, let's say one bottle of water,
okay,
right? But you want to make ice out of it. Now, there's a Tupperware, empty Tupperware, versus the ice cube maker. When you're pouring the water in, something goes into the water, right? So the Tupperware gets mixed up. And the compartmentalized ice cube maker only has that part that's contaminated. That is the definition of how a man thinks and a woman thinks, right? That's a difference. I'm not saying that either are wrong or right, but that's just how women carry all of their trauma and experiences and then move forward in life. That's how men treat their experiences and trauma in life. I'm not saying that they learn or not. I'm just saying the experiences and what they go through in life gets compartmentalized differently and mixed differently and applied differently to their past, present, and future.
Right.
And that's why I think we have to unite, because the difference in the two makes us beautiful.
Right.
So if it's one-sided, it's lopsided, it's not going to work. But now that there's a fashion on toxic masculinity is going around, I think we should take it. Okay, we'll take it. But let's talk about toxic femininity too. And I'm toxic, and I'm okay with that. And okay, I get it. If we're going to be in a circle with that conversation, let's look at the circle that we're going in, stop, assess, and then move on, because it's too much.
You said something that's real key. It's the unite part. And I think both sides of the equation need to understand that, yes, your view is important, which is, we have to respect each other to realize that, yes, your stance is valid, but on the flip side, so is mine. And so the only way that we're going to get to resolution is to have conversation. And there's the thing that we need to realize, that if you don't have the conversation, resolution never happens. I don't care what it is in any discrepancy or any problem in the world. If they're not communicating, you don't get to the resolution. And so if we keep feeding one side of it as being the problem and not realizing it's not necessarily what's being done, it's just how you're receiving it. And so let's break down that conversation into saying, okay, so how do you receive it? What are you hearing? And then being okay to hear what they're saying and not get offended because it's not necessarily what you believe. But in order for us to get to resolution, your side needs to be heard as well as mine. And then, okay, so if we agree to disagree, that's fine. But then let's get to a point where we can continue to move in the same direction. Because otherwise, like you said, it's going to be one-sided and it's just going to keep going around in circles.
So to what you're saying, it's very funny because now that, you know, there's a very famous person on the internet. They broke the internet because of, they call him toxic masculinity.
Yeah, I know.
And a lot of what he says I agree with. And I know that a lot of it's internet talk. So he had to hype it up because a lot of it's entertainment, and that's how you get out there.
Right.
But I totally agree with what he says, even though a lot of women don't. But here's the thing. There's a lot of women that are now noticing that it's oversaturated with this woman power thing, that they say, I'd rather have a man that could just keep me at the house. I know tons of women. They're like, I rather than doing this, I rather stay home, cook, clean, and just, you know, handle that.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that that's what women should do. That's what women told me.
Right.
So I was like, oh, well, that's beautiful. I don't want my woman opening the doors when I go out, right? Or doing anything around the house, or when she's with me. Why is she with me if she has to open the door? No, I'm going to open the door for you, right? So you can wait.
Well, I think also what you just said, I mean, they say chivalry is dead. Well, not as far as I'm concerned. And so, you know, for me, because I have a daughter who just turned 21, love you, babe. But I've been opening her doors, you know, since she was little, and still open her doors because I need to have her understand what a man should be because of the way I was raised. And there's nothing wrong with, people call it whipped, you know, when we were growing up. Oh, you whooped because you do all these things for her. Well, I'm sorry, my brother, I'm not dating you. So that same energy I'm not going to give to you that I give to her, because I'm trying to build this relationship and we're not like that. So you can say whatever you want, and that's why you're still single and I'm still with mine. So
and back to episode 1 on some of the topics that we discussed. I think that's because you understood that you had something that could reciprocate what you were given to. And that's got nothing to do with other people's business. I mean, you know, other people's opinions. They could mind their business, and then you mind yours, you know, to the point where you and I were discussing, we both agree that's how it should be, right? But we do care to a certain amount of what people say. We hear you. We won't listen. We hear you.
Right. Well, you said something very important. And I mean, it's been said, I don't know, many times as far as, you know, you shouldn't care what people think. The problem is that we are so caught up in it since we've been raised. I mean, you think about the first day of school when you were, you know, whatever age. You wanted to make sure you had the flyest shoes, the flyest outfit. So when you stepped on campus, people thought of you as a certain level. But if you didn't have the opportunity, you had to come in with some off-brand shoes. And, you know, when I was growing up, you know, our pants was Tough Skins and Rough Housers. Well, that was Sears, you know, and, you know, Sears doesn't exist anymore. But, you know, those were the pants that your parents could afford. You didn't realize that that's what it was, is the fact that that's all they could afford. You just should have been happy that you had brand new. But because now the world is so much crazier and we're so, you know, materialistic, where it's like, if you don't drive the right car, if you don't have the right clothes, if you don't, you know, have the right job,
fresh haircut,
all these, if you don't have all these things, then you're less than. And it has nothing to do with the fact that you're less than. But it goes back to also what we said in the first one, and it's what's your self-worth. And unfortunately, we're not taught how to be comfortable in who we are. You don't realize that till you get older. And that's the part where, you know, wisdom comes in. And, you know, I always say wisdom takes birthdays to get. If you look at any culture, you come from a culture where the elders are looked up to. And why are the elders looked up to? They got wisdom. And so you go sit at their feet and have conversation, and then they're feeding you what they know based on the experiences that they've had. And you don't realize till you get to that point, well, all the stuff that I had been chasing this whole time meant nothing. Because ultimately what's really important in life, you can't put a price tag on.
That's beautiful. There was another article that I was reading that in different cultures, the older people, I didn't know this growing up in my country where I'm from. But in different cultures, elders are looked up to. I didn't know over here elders weren't looked up to.
Oh, total opposite.
I had no idea.
Total opposite.
But when you look at my life, because I'm pretty young, I'm pretty wise, and I'm doing certain things, that's because I can collect data. Now, just because data and experience and everything is the same, right? We just call it different things.
Right.
But not just living through experiencing without thinking, which is just data,
Okay.
is not really helping you. What really helps you is analyze the data.
Okay.
And you can see, hey, X, Y, and Z, therefore you're going to make this decision when this comes up, and then you're going to counteract on, X, Y, and Z. That happens because you analyze the data, even though you didn't go through it. You have analyzed data that you could apply to in your life. Now, I have a lot of that, but I didn't know that I was cultivating that on my own, seeking elderly advice, wise advice. In the Bible, they say a wise man seeks wise counsel.
Yeah. Well,
Right?
that's extremely important. And then back to your point as far as the data, I mean, so, I'm a little older and a little wiser, but what I equate to what you said as far as data is like education or, knowledge. Knowledge is great if you apply it. And it doesn't become knowledge until you apply it, because otherwise it's just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah.
So, same thing with you saying, your data is you apply it. And then the thing about it though is, I mean, there are very, they're great. There's a lot of smart people, but they're only smart on paper. You have a conversation with them and they can't do anything as common as, saying, excuse me, or thank you, or, you're walking through. I mean, I was in the airport yesterday and I almost snapped on this gentleman. I mean, it takes a lot for me to snap now. I mean, when I was younger, I snap in a heartbeat, but we were going through TSA and he put his stuff down and he was in front of me and he turned his back. So I thought, if you turn your back to me and you walking forward, then you done. So I grabbed a bucket and put it on the thing and he turned around like he was going to reach for one. And I'm like, well, first of all, excuse me would be great. Don't think you're going to reach in front of me and don't say anything. But then, he stared me up and down like he was going to square up. And I'm like, wait a minute, is this man getting ready to get beat up in the airport? And I had to catch myself, and my daughter was on the other side and she watched and she heard me say, because he looked at me, he's like, what? And I was like, well, you have a nice day. And I said it very aggressive, but at least I said, have a nice day, and not something that I probably
would have said.
You know what I mean? Because that's all it takes is whatever.
But that's experience too, because I'm like, hey, we're all men, and especially kind of classic type men.
They exist?
We
sorry.
Last of the dying breed, right?
Bro.
But we know how to handle business, right? And sometimes handling it in a wise way is really important, right? Because you don't want to be in a situation where you can't get out, So back to your point on teaching your son, never corner yourself in.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we don't want to do that, especially in an airport. You don't want to be banned from the airport and XYZ.
Yeah, I wanted to get home. I didn't want to get stuck where I was.
Also, to touch upon your point, right now, all that experience in this new world and how it's going with, dividing us, and that's just new information that's going around. It's kind of viral. And it's tainting people's minds into thinking in a certain way. The gender roles and, this new blurred line of, which goes which and whatever only stands in a world like it is right now. Once this is taken away, it goes right back to men and women. And it's very sad to say, because right now we might not be living in an ideal world where, my girl's son, right, is going through some stuff at school because of certain, things that people can say and get away because of
Right.
Gender roles now. So, we can, sit and discuss multiple things about what and what, but at the end of the day, I think what we need is unity, and we really need to think about it because, in a heartbeat, this can be taken away, and
Yeah.
it's gonna come down to we have two legs, we have 2 legs, we got to use 2 to walk.
True. I think also to your point, as far as the next generation, her sons, and I have kids, and my thing is to make sure that the line of communication stays open. I mean, we've had generations that don't share, and once again, your culture has a track record, for lack of a better word or phrase, rather, to just that. You pass down stuff from generation to generation, which means the elders are speaking to the younger speaking to the babies, and yet it continues to go. As you get older, the communication and conversations continue to happen. We're here on this, side of the planet. We don't necessarily, and then depending on where you are as far as economic or social status, those things, and if you're one of minority, you really don't get those conversations because there is a split somewhere in the chain where that information doesn't get transferred. And so my goal as a next generation, to make sure the ones that are behind me, we have these conversations, because it's important. Because if someone who has the information doesn't dispense it to the ones that need it, it's never going to be reciprocated, because they don't necessarily are looking for it on the YouTube or Google or whatever. And so then it becomes an issue when they get older, and you've lost so many years in between trying to figure it out. And we don't know 20 years from now what will be the search engine. So, but now I'm having a conversation with you, and what I know and what my experience is and my expertise and my reference, I can give to you one-on-one. Why would I not do that? Why are we not having conversations amongst each other? And, I don't just talk to young men, but because I am a young man in heart, I know what it's like. I've been down that road. Now, I'll speak to women only on a subject that applies to them from a man's point of view. I'm not telling them how to be a woman. I'm not telling you how to get a man. That ain't my place. But my place is I tell you what a man's thinking, because I know I've been in that situation before. So those are the kind of things. But if we're not having these communications amongst each other and being okay with being transparent and exposing, some things that may be a little questionable, but the point is they need to understand that it's okay to be in that position. Because how many times has one who's been in a position where they feel uncomfortable, but they don't want to talk about it because they think that they're going to be dismissed as a person, because it's a human feeling. Why are we having this conversation? Why are you freaking out? It's like, oh, and then when it is said from someone else, they go, oh yeah, me too. And then at that point, it's like, well, how long have you been dealing with that issue that you didn't have a conversation with? And then the fact that the older people are not willing to say, look, I made a mistake. And so in order for you not to make the same mistake, let me just share with you what I got. And what's the problem with doing that?
Going back to Mark's point, there's a broken link in the chain of communication that passes down the information, and that is exactly why we do this on the XR Vision Media podcast. So we would really love for you to like, comment, subscribe, and especially we're going to start putting polls and, hearing your opinions on what the subject should be or what you guys want us to talk about. So make sure you guys comment first, and then if you like the video, and then subscribe, because we love to stay connected to you. Okay, going on to the next topic.
So, Tomas, let me ask you a question. We've been referencing where you're from, and so you were raised in Japan, am I correct?
Yes, I was born and raised in Japan. I came over here when I was 19 years old. My dad was Puerto Rican black. My mom's Japanese. growing up over there, I knew that there was going to come a time where I wasn't going to fit in society, nor I wanted to conform to society, because it's a beautiful culture. It's a beautiful society. Unfortunately, for me to be living the way I am living right now, I had to go either stay conformed in my hometown or go to Tokyo and live my life in the central city area of Japan, which is one of the most advanced cultures in the world. However, Tokyo was too much for me. I really didn't like it. So I decided to come to America because I have dual citizenship. My family's from New York. We're proud New Yorkers. And, I think New York and LA. Also, I would say Oakland too. I really like.
Okay.
I would like to still venture out. I want to go check out Portland and more greener states. I love those. But I just had access to either Los Angeles or New York, and I decided to come over here. It was one of the best, hardest, and gratifying choice that I made in my life.
You said something key.
Yes.
The fact that it wasn't the life that you wanted, which is very interesting. You were 19 years old, so I'm just trying to figure out how you figured that part out.
Let me say this. The part where I knew that it wasn't my place to be, I figured that out when I was like 5, 6.
So what were the things that happened at that age that made you figure this is not what I wanted?
In Japan, even though I look a lot Asian, in Japan, from 100% pure blood Japanese people, they see the black in me. I'm dark. My father kind of resembles, the same features, same type of hair, same or darker skin tone than you.
Okay.
And I was just part black in a non-foreign area.
Okay.
In Japan, it's a homogenic country. That's why they kept it really smoothly running and very controlled. And like I said, after the World War II, they burned down Tokyo. They built it really fast. And in about 30 years, they got the city back. So they know how to rebuild things and then keep it conformed and unified and then moving forward. However, that was the aspect that got me kind of, I wouldn't say ousted, but I just saw a difference in how people were treating me versus different kids at the same age. I grew up in the same area, same school, same kindergarten and everything, and they still treated me different. Now, granted, I have a lot of great friends, lifelong friends. They still call me today.
Okay.
They still want to come to this very, place right now, come and see me. However, I knew that just by the way people look at you in the supermarkets.
And like you said, it
wasn't a place.
I had an idea of the fact that because your shade is a little darker than theirs. I mean, people say they're colorblind, which I don't totally believe. I mean, even if you were a dog, dogs don't see in color, but they see in black and white, which means there's gradation, which means there's a difference. But you said something key, and I want to touch it a little bit on. So being raised in Japan, what is the communication style or what you've learned in your growth? I mean, what have you seen a difference between Japanese communication versus, the America's conversations and communication?
So, to your point, you said earlier that there's a missing link in the chain of communication in the United States. I never really knew that until you brought it up, but I started figuring it out. But when you said it and described it like that, a light turned on.
Okay.
In Japan, typically, older people teach whoever that's underneath them. So there's a very clear line in between somebody that's at your age, same age, underneath you, so younger, and then older.
Okay.
1 year older is your superior.
Got it.
Your same age is your,
Your peers.
peers, and then underneath you is your, I guess, however you want to call it, but they're underneath.
Right,
you,
right.
So there's a very clear line, especially gradually when you go up from school to, like elementary school to junior high school, and then college
Okay.
or university. The line gets very clear. So we have to go to teachers, respect them, ask for their advice, teachings, and then it goes down to older people than us, passing it down to us, and then we got to teach it down to the people that are younger than us. So that was ingrained in the culture, and I never really understood it until you described it. Over here in America, there's a very beautiful thing called mentorship, and there's a very clear specific goal for people that want to get that, and that's why I think the business on coaching is really big, because over here it is accessible and it is out there, but you have to search it. It's not taught. Over there, it's a mundane thing, but everybody knows it because it's passed down from the generations above, and that's part of the beautiful thing. Part of a beautiful thing that we're trying to expose and share with our message and what we're trying to do here, because just by this conversation, something that I didn't know that I was going through, a light turned on, and you shed light on the darkness, and now I have a clear idea on what that is.
You said you caught something early in life, which really, really intrigued me. I mean, for you to figure something out at 5 years old was really powerful. But my question to you is, what do you see based on what you've learned coming here, adapting, and now the difference between what you knew and what you see and where you are in between as far as communication?
The one thing that I really notice in the difference from the two countries is over there, it's kind of like the message game. I don't know what you guys call it over there, but in Japan, they call it a message game. So like there's 10 people. The first one gets a message. Telephone? Okay.
It's the telephone.
So in Japan, in Japanese direct translation, it says the message game, right? But that's kind of how they operate.
Okay.
So that's what they beat in you. There's a word where I recently experienced that I shared this, experience that I went through, and I even said it. But there's a saying, the nail that sticks out gets hammered. And in Japan, it's very fast to get hammered.
Got it.
Over here, there was an incident that happened, about 2-3 weeks ago that I shared my opinion on. That's the same thing. The nail that sticks out gets hammered.
Mm-hmm.
They want to conform you. They want to, we don't want you talking like this, sharing your opinion.
Got it.
And disturbing the peace or the unity of the group, when I'm only saying something that's very true, but because they're operating in a certain way, me even speaking about it is the nail that's sticking out, and it's not really good. So going back to, your point, over there in Japan, they really control and unify, and they did a great job at if you have a message and there's a message coming from above, it goes down. Mm-hmm. It's in the culture engraved over there.
Okay.
But like I said, it's a common thing where it just happens. So the message that's given might be of a cause, or because of a certain reason, or because it has to be ran in this way.
Okay.
So you might not be getting the right message that needs to fit your life at a certain level. Over here, it's kind of like a free-for-all.
Okay.
You don't really get no message. You don't really get a community unless you're in one or you build one. You don't have a structure unless you build one to receive that type of knowledge, or you learn it somewhere, or you have to have the curiosity to, retrieve that information or seek that help, seek that, what's it called? Teacher, so that you could get the specific knowledge that you're looking for. However, if you do locate it, it's very abundant and it is very prominent. It is strong information on how you can utilize it for your life if you do find it. So I think that's the difference. Over here, it's not much passed down unless you come from a certain ethnicity background, or and then over there, regardless of what it is, because like I said, it's a homogeneous country. They try to share amongst them,
right,
which is just one race.
Right.
They did a great job on passing down that knowledge.
That's pretty powerful, because you said, I mean, the contrast is so different. I mean, which is the important part. And what I've grasped, even just what you just said, you said I gave you some nuggets earlier. Well, you just gave me some nuggets right now in regards to that information being passed down and how it affected you. And for me, because I come from a culture where it's all over the place, and actually it's been up until recent where it's all over the place. I'm coming from a generation where things were passed down. And so in regards to stuff being passed down, I had a conversation with my mother yesterday in regards to some things that happened. So for me, for 9 years, it was just my mother and I. So I didn't know, 9 years. So it was just her and I. We did all kind of stuff together. And so when she got married, when I was 9, she told me, "This is your dad, do what he says." And so we had this conversation yesterday, but I was like, "Mom, that's what she told me." She said, "To be truthfully honest, son, I thought I was doing the best with what I had." And at that time, she's 27 years old. You're relatively young. You know what I mean? You think you're doing the best thing. And then I had to realize that, my mom, I love my mom to death. She is, the first woman I fell in love with. I mean, my wife now is my everything, but my mother's still my first love. And so, but when I said that to her, and she was like, "Well, you have to understand, when my brother came, which was 2 years later, or actually a year later, it was weird because I never had any other siblings. I'm the oldest grandchild. I'm the oldest nephew. It was just me. And for 7 years, I was the only anything. I was the only nephew, whatever. But it didn't really bother me because my cousin didn't live in my house. Then my brother shows up. And so I told her how I felt, and she goes, "We have to understand, son, I felt the same way." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she told me she's 22 months younger than my aunt, her oldest sister. And she said the same way she felt from her sister was the same way I felt. And so I didn't understand until now. I'm 55 years old. I didn't know, you know what I mean? But it's like, how much time has passed? And so it's like, now we're like relating on the same conversation. We're like on the same page. It's like, oh. So it really turned my eyes on it and like, wow, what's really going on? So, it's the wisdom is extremely important. And I think also what we're doing in this medium and what we're doing on this show is because it is so important to have the conversations. I hope I'm encouraging you who are watching, that are liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel, that it's something that turns on in you and go, I should have that conversation, because you have no idea when your time is up. You know your birth date, you don't know your death date, but it's the dash in the middle that's the most important part, and you have no idea how long that is. So if you who are watching have someone you need to have a conversation with, take the low road and go have the conversation. Because if you keep waiting for them, it's never gonna happen. But you don't realize, even if you just approach it, and all of a sudden, it's just gonna unfold. And those are the things, I'm at such relief at this point, because it's stuff I should have known already. You know what I mean? And so how much time has lapsed that I missed, and even just vibing on the same wavelength with my mother. I mean, and we realize that mother-sons have a stronger relationship than father-sons. And so, I mean, Bill Cosby makes this joke, it's like, hey, you teach your son how to do all these things. You're in the front yard playing with him and you're doing all these things to get him where he needs to go. And he's finally on the spotlight. He's on camera and he goes, hi, Mom. And it's like, wait, what did I do? And not realizing that he really knows and acknowledges you. It's just, he has that relationship with his mom. And, now he's on camera where he wants to make sure I see you, Mom, because what he's done up until that point on the field or whatever was because of Dad. Mm-hmm. But he didn't give you the props you deserve, but he does because he's doing what you taught him. And those are the things that we miss because we think that we're supposed to be in the limelight and whatever. And it's always the ones in your business. Mm-hmm. Who's the true person that makes the things happen? It's you. Mm-hmm. It's the unseen. And it's the shadows.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think I want to make a term where you say the word, the man in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And then you gotta, look at things that he doesn't see, right? Mm-hmm. I try to really not perfect, but I work really hard on myself. Mm-hmm. I made sure before I met her, or I made sure before I, got to this point where I spend a lot of time alone. Mm-hmm. Even now, I spend a lot of time alone. And oftentimes it's at night where things are very quiet. I spend a lot of time alone, and I'm very cognitive because I did all the shadow works within myself, so that when I see myself in the mirror, I don't see, oh, I should have done that. No, we already did this. What do we need else to do?
I'm going to say something and don't take it derogatory. Yeah. You did ninja work.
True.
You're a ninja.
True. And I think that's one of the most important work that you have to face and do amongst within yourself, not amongst, within yourself, because that's what's going to connect you with other people even better because you know your flaws.
What? And you said a key point at that point as far as by yourself. The problem is that people are not comfortable who they are by themselves based on how people perceive them when they're amongst those people. The problem is that in order for you to do the work, in order to interact with other people, you got to deal with you first and be okay with who you are, where you are.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said, I think I was very cognitive, and then, I started doing things because I stopped caring about what other people thought. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't care about what I make you feel like.
Right.
If I offended you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. You have to mind how you make others feel, but you have to not care about what they make you feel like, and I think you have to face yourself. Going back to what you said, it's not, we already have the start. It's not about the end. It's about the journey, right? Mm-hmm. So I love my journey, and to make my journey worth it, I had to do a lot bit of self walk with myself, and sometimes even my woman thinks, what the fuck is he doing, all alone and whatever. But there's a lot going in my head that I'm like, I need to do this aside from the business, just me. And then there's the relationship part where I'm like, oh, I did this wrong in my relationship. I did this. So when things happen with her and I think she could attest to this too. I say what is going on. This is what's going on. But especially like the past 3-4 years, I never say, you did this, you messed up. No, I say, what can I do? What can I improve on? How can I help you? How can I help this? And then maybe you should change this. Because if I change, 90% of the work is done. Just 10% can you add to it? And if you don't want to add to it, hey, I guess honestly, I didn't bring enough to the table where you felt like you had to change 10% towards it. I'm not saying change who you are, just change how you deal with things. So, just things like that. But to the point, it is a beautiful medium and a format and a community that we're building right now, because I want to pride myself as a lifelong student in a semi young person that's always looking up towards elders, and I'm very keen and very smart on finding the elders that I can really listen to. And the one thing that I really focus on, if they're not at where you want to go, don't listen to them. Collect data and then,
Right.
reference that in your life, but don't listen to what they say because they're not at where you want to be, but still understand where they are at so that you could use that data to reference that on what not to do. And I think I'm very successful in that regard. And I like to pride myself as a lifelong student. And, I got elders like you, and hopefully the people that are viewing
Hey, well,
right
watch
now,
that comment. No, I'm just kidding. It's a joke.
the people that are viewing understand from how I listen to you that just by listening, you don't got to really talk. You learn a lot.
Well, God, even in his creation, gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means you should listen twice as much as you speak.
Yeah.
And, we are quick to insert our own foot in our mouth based on the fact that we don't listen. So he has a way of humbling you quickly. But you said something also that I really want to touch on in regards to, lifelong student. We should be understanding that that's your journey. That is the line in between. It's the things that you learn, and you learn until you are out of here. Even on your deathbed, you learn something. You just may not be able to give it to someone, but you did learn something. You learned that life is done and it's over. But you said also as well in regards to finding mentorship and finding people to speak into your life. So my question to you is, what is it that triggers the magnet towards the energy that you're looking for to have a mentor?
So, like I said, it always starts with the self-work, the shadow work.
Okay.
I like to dive into the shadows and then see. From there, I could find out what's missing and what I need to acquire.
Okay.
Then I start implementing or start searching for what I need to learn in life. Oftentimes, right now, audiobooks and internet and YouTube videos, like the format that we're on right now. A lot of information is available. However, there's actual in-person applicable information that I am looking for so that I could have the time shared and then ask for their opinion. So when you have those in mind and you start walking in life, living, and still be open to regardless of how good or bad that it comes in your way, it is a form of a blessing. So try to take everything and then understand what that was, what the lessons were, and take it one by one day at a time. And then the last thing that I would say is be open towards whoever that you meet. Begin with a hi and then end with a thank you.
You said there's quite a bit in that last
1 minute.
that last comment. No, seriously. And because this is something that is, once again, being a lifelong student, you don't realize the education come from anywhere. But being able to see it as what it is, take the best, leave the rest. You also said something that I want to touch on real fast. I know we only have a few minutes at this point, but in regards to the self-inventory and the things that you're looking for, but what happens to the things that you're not on your list that come in? How do you respond to that? Because you, to me, it wasn't on my list, but you hit me upside the head with the culture you're from and how things are and the way it's regulated, for lack of a better word, into how it's supposed to happen. So the things that you don't look for, how do you receive those lessons? Because
I got an answer, real quick answer, because I know we don't have time. Going back to episode 1, you said the what's it called? The analogy of the cup overflows, but if you give, there's more that's gonna flow into the cup.
Right.
I think I'm a natural born giver. So when I'm giving, I tend to give to everybody. I'm a natural born giver, and I tend to give to everybody. And sometimes even to the point where my woman has got to tell me, like, hey, you got to stop.
Bring it back.
But because I'm such a giver, that there's enough room empty on my plate. So regardless of where it flows from, I can catch it, I can analyze it. If I don't need it, it stays in my archive, but I could just give it to somebody else. And then, it goes onto the search. And a lot of the times what you think you don't need is the thing that you need. So that's my answer.
That's a lesson in itself. I mean, that by itself is enough. And I think if we continue to go forward and having that kind of attitude is, because you have no idea where the lesson's coming from, but the fact is that you can learn. And even if it's a tough lesson, it was a lesson you needed. It's a lesson you needed, and it needs to happen. And so, this again is Mark, and here we are on XR Vision Media. I want to thank you for your time, because it is very precious. It is a commodity you can never get back, but you decided to spend your time with us today. And so we just ask you to continue to like, share, subscribe to this channel, and comment, please. If you have something you really want to talk about, throw it in the comments and we can bring it up. I just want to thank you. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace.
Check us out on the next episode. Bye, guys.